What's up, JCIP? I'm Dino De Leon. I'm going to talk about argumentation for today. It's very important for you to learn how to argue because in debating, you have to advance a particular motion. And if you're advancing a particular motion, you have to be able to offer the right reasons to convince not only the adjudicator, but your audience in believing that a motion should be carried. So obviously, it's easier said than done, but don't worry because we have a template for you on how to properly argue. It will take a lot of practice, and that's the reason why we have this webinar. But eventually you'll get the hang of it. And then what's good about the skill of argumentation is that you can use it in other aspects of your lives when you're, let's say, for example, writing an essay, when you're trying to justify a particular stance, even in your own daily lives. The skill of argumentation comes handy. So I hope you get something or two, maybe, or three out of this particular module, and we'll start. So, argumentation. So an argument is the reason that debaters actually use in order to forward or a particular proposition or defend their side. Arguments are delivered by the first two speakers. Because the last speaker, as you know, as discussed a while ago by Roland, is going to be the rebuttal speaker. So to look for an argument, debaters must answer why they support or disagree with the motion. So if in the affirmative bench, you have to just put the word because at the end of the motion. So for example, in the motion, this House would legalize death penalty, you just put the word because. That's the litmus word that we use as debaters. We have to legalize death penalty because, and then you put the sentence. So if the word the entire sentence that you're going to use does not suit the motion plus the word because, then most probably there's something wrong. So to illustrate the point, we use this motion as an example. This House would legalize child labor. Depending on their side, debaters must answer the question on why or why not child labor ought to be legalized. So for the affirmative side, it has to answer why child labor must be legalized. So for example, because if you're going to notice the manual, there's the word because it allows children to earn livelihood to help sustain the badly needed basic resources of their families. That only makes sense because the only reason why you would allow kids to work is precisely because there's a need for them to work and there's a need for them to feed their families. So that's the first argument, that there's a need and that children will be able to fulfill this because they can earn livelihood to help sustain their families. The second one would be because it is an imperative that a person, regardless of age, must be given the opportunity to contribute in survival. This is more of a principled argument because it's important for each and every individual, when we're talking about survival, to be able to contribute or at least have their fair share. Otherwise, if they wouldn't be able to give their fair share, there's going to be the family will have a difficult time surviving. Again, notice that I've used the word because in order for me to be able to track whether the argument makes sense when attached to the motion. On the other hand, the negative side must present answers on why child labor must not be legalized. So again, let's use the word because child labor, more than it gives income to working children, makes them vulnerable to physical and psychological harm. This is when you're going to discuss how children are fragile, how children shouldn't be working to begin with. They have to be doing something else in order for them to actually develop as a person. Or for them to be a crucial resource in society. They shouldn't be working at such a tender age, right? Another argument might be because it is an imperative that labor be reserved to adults and that childhood must be spared from the burden for it. If you're going to take a look at it, there are three types of arguments in general. In the examples above, you saw the principled argument. The principled argument being it's an imperative, regardless of age, for individuals to be given the opportunity to survive. That's a principled argument. It's not a pragmatic argument. And when we're talking about survival, whatever happens, each and every individual has the right to do whatever it takes to survive. So that's a principled argument. The other one is a pragmatic argument. Maybe in order to provide resources for their family. It contributes to the economy as well, and all of those things, right? The third type of an argument would be the harm or benefit argument, right? So if you say that you're compromising the future of society because you will have children who are not well developed in order to respond to the needs of society, that's actually a future harm. There could be a future benefit as well in any motion. So there are generally three types of arguments. Again, the first type of an argument is a principled argument. So an example of this, let's say, for example, the legalization of prostitution would be women own their body, and the state and society do not have any business whatsoever in terms of deciding what the woman should do with her body, right? So that's a principled argument. The second one, again, is a practical argument. It provides jobs, and jobs are good, actually, and it's a practical argument at that. The third may be a harm or a benefit. Maybe the harm would be it will actually worsen the incidence of abuses the moment that you legalize it, or maybe a benefit would be there, it will limit the, or it will lessen the number of harms of instances of abuses, precisely because women or prostitution will be able to regulate how women or even men who engage into the trade will be used, or will how their services will actually be availed of. So there are, again, those are three types of arguments that you can use in any kind of debate. Once answers have been made for or against the motion, debaters can now begin to construct them. So there's a big difference between just identifying an argument and constructing an argument. And in debates, given that you have 5 minutes, in real parliamentary debating, it's 7 minutes. Sometimes it seems like it's too long to speak for 5 minutes, but it's not necessarily the case if you know how to construct the argument properly. Again, in debating, you can't just have wild claims. It's very important for you to develop the arguments, and we're going to show you why. Again, this is a crucial skill that you can learn and that you can apply in all other aspects of your lives. So what will be the parts of arguments, and how do you substantiate an argument? This is what we use in the LaSalle Debate Society. We have the Heddle format. So the first one would be the handle. It's the name of the argument. It has to be crisp, precise statement of the name of the argument. What does that mean? It means that you cannot just make a wild claim, but a generic claim or a general claim at that. For example, in the case of legalization of prostitution, if you say, I want to legalize prostitution because of the benefits, well, you just wasted the time of the adjudicator and the time of everyone who's listening, because obviously you would most probably want to legalize prostitution because of benefits. But the question would be, what specific benefit? The complexion changes if you say, I want to legalize prostitution because it generates jobs. Automatically, the audience and the judge would know that you will be discussing in the next 1 minute or two that how, in fact, the legalization of prostitution generates jobs. You get that? So the handle has to be crisp, precise statement of the name of the argument. And the handle, just by stating the handle, automatically the audience would know what you will be discussing afterwards. The next part will be the explanation. Now, what will be the explanation part, right? This is the meat of argumentation. And you just have to basically answer 3 questions. The first question would be how? The second question would be why? And the third question will be so what? Right? Again, let's try to take a look at another example. In the example of legalization of prostitution, the argument would be it protects women prostitutes. Now, that's the handle. In the next 2 minutes, you will know that I will be talking about protection. Now, let's move on to the explanation. Again, you have to answer 3 questions: how, why, and so what. Now, let's move on to the how. Before you'd be able to answer the how, you have to establish the problem. What is the problem? Is status quo. The problem is that a lot of women are being abused, maybe gagged by their sadomasochist customers, and they can't do anything about it because what they're doing is illegal. They're engaged in an illegitimate trade. So what happens is, if you legalize prostitution, and this goes into the how, there will be legal frameworks that will be established that will legalize the trade and will provide guidelines as to how the services will be offered and will be availed of. That means that there will be boundaries, limits, and the moment that the customer perhaps would go beyond that limit or that boundary, the prostitute can now report to the police. And that's very crucial because the police can accordingly investigate and find out the truth. right? So that's the how. The how basically is that it provides the legal framework that will protect women prostitutes. That's the how. You can demonstrate it by saying maybe they will have security of tenure, which any laborer actually enjoys in the status quo. They will have other benefits such as medical checkups, perhaps SSS, pag-ibig, and maybe PhilHealth. And at the very least, they will be treated as laborers and they will enjoy all the labor standard laws that we have right now. That's crucial, right? That's the how. Why? Why is it important to protect women prostitutes? Now we're going into that into trying to answer the question why. Because we have to understand that these prostitutes are victims of circumstance, but more than anything else, they are parents too. They also have to put food on their respective tables, send their children to school, and they have to earn a living, a decent living, because these are individuals who also experience what us or what ordinary persons also experience daily. So it's very and that answers the questions why. The question why. Why do we have to protect women prostitutes? Because they're citizens too. They're victims of circumstance. They're ordinary citizens who also try to make a living and try to survive every day. Then we ask the question, so what? So what if we protect women prostitutes? Then the government is actually fulfilling its obligation, its role to protect its citizens. And the government does not only protect its citizens, in particular, it protects those who are most vulnerable in society. And you have to remember that in a lot of instances, these women prostitutes are also victims of circumstance that will require government support, government intervention, and most importantly, government protection. Then you move on to the demonstration, the explication of the argument such that it can be grasped by the senses. A while ago, if you've noticed, I already tried to demonstrate all of these things. But maybe in this particular instance, you can talk about the dynamics of what happens in the bedroom, how women cannot do anything, and how convenient it would be for them to report such kinds of abuses. And then afterwards, parameters, mechanisms, and maybe ways can be introduced by the government in order for authorities to be able for them to be able to investigate the scenarios. And at the very least, even if we cannot verify, because there's it's quite difficult to verify what happens in the bedroom. There's also a power of deterrence there. Even those people who would want to attempt to abuse the prostitutes will have second thoughts whether or not they would actually proceed with their dastardly plans to exploit and abuse these prostitutes. So there's a demonstration there. It actually makes the argument more persuasive precisely because I've drawn pictures as to how the establishment of these frameworks will protect women prostitutes. And then you move on to the examples. This is where you can perhaps provide a parallel example, an empirical evidence, data, past historical incidents wherein the argument was successful. In the case of prostitution and protection of women prostitutes, maybe you can say that in Germany, in the Netherlands, or other areas wherein prostitution was legalized, wherein the instances of abuses actually was lessened dramatically. So that's the example. It strengthens the claim by providing an empirical evidence, a past incident, a historical example, or even pieces of data wherein you can say in a study conducted, let's say, for example, in Germany, 20% of abuses actually went down because now prostitutes are actually able to report the abuses of customers, especially considering the fact that abuses actually happen if there are no reports that happen, because those people who would want to commit such actions know that they will not be reported and they will not be apprehended by the authorities. So that's the example. Now, what's missing afterwards? The link. Bear in mind that I've been discussing the arguments maybe for 2.5 minutes. And the judge and the audience might be at a loss. Where is this headed through? And then you remind them what the argument is all about. The argument is about protection, and given that we were able to prove that indeed women prostitutes will be more protected, or prostitutes in general, not just women prostitutes, will be protected through the legalization of prostitution, That is the reason why it's incumbent upon society to legalize prostitution. So you put them back to your stance. You remind them about the motion and why you're arguing this particular motion to begin with. So that's the Heddle format, right? I know, it's fluid for me. It takes a lot of practice, and that's the reason why we're giving you this webinar, to make sure that at the very least you try constructing arguments once we give you the motions, and as National Chairman LA a while ago stated, we're going to give you the motions beforehand, so maybe you can construct the arguments beforehand, vet it amongst yourselves, and try to prep. That's what we call it, prepping a case. It's sometimes tiring to prep a case. Sometimes, at least for us, when we were doing this professionally, or seemingly professionally when we were in college, we sometimes try to crack an argument for 2 hours, 3 hours. That's just a single argument, right? But given the kind of motion that we'll be releasing to you guys, these are motions that are friendly for newbies, for beginners, and I'm sure that if you try it constantly, you'll have fun eventually in constructing arguments, right? So there are examples that we've given to you through the debate manuals. They're self-explanatory, one of which would be this House would legalize child labor, as you see in this in the screen. The second one is that religions should embrace commodification of symbols. You read it by yourselves. I've given you several examples a while ago, but most definitely it will help you a lot if you follow the Heddle format in argumentation. It makes the argument more complete. It makes the argument more believable. It makes the argument more cogent. And in the end, you would be able to persuade the audience if the argument was argued comprehensively. So I think that's my, or there's a third example. This House would condemn violent games. I'll leave all the reading materials to you guys. If you have further questions, clarifications, you may email the National Chairman, and I'm sure he would be more than happy to answer your possible questions. Good luck, guys. Good luck, and I'm sure it's going to be a great debate, and we'll see you there.